The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
Let's get off and rolling right now. It is the Dave Hooker Show, and it is represented by Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. With Caleb Calhoun, I am Dave Hooker. Today on the program, absolutely loaded up as usual. We'll have this day in Tennessee sports history, stat of the day, my Heisman watch, which is not only what players have done to this point, but what I project them to do forward, almost like a power ranking. Nico Iamaleava has been pretty high, but there's reason for me to believe that he may not have a real opportunity, but that might be a good thing for the Vols. Is Tennessee more likely to go 9-3 or 12-0? We'll get to that. And boom, it is Will West joining us now of the Sports Animal. We'll bring Will on. I got some topics to throw at him. Will, we've decided that we're going to put guests in the middle. Are you comfortable being in the middle?
Put me where you want me, man. I'm not worried about it.
There you go. All right. Real quick, let's put this on the poll question. Caleb, if we can, are you okay with players having agents? Because, Will, we discussed that on your show, and you can hear Will and the Sports Animal from 3 to 7 each and every weekday. This notion that Lance Hurd has representation. You're a forward-thinking guy, but a little bit older, too. So I'm curious where you fall in this issue.
Hey, it's part of it, right? Whenever you're going to have that kind of business being done, people are going to have someone that looks out on their behalf. So I do question how reputable are the people that are in this space at this point in time is going to be a big question, right? Because everything's kind of early adoption right now, which means you're going to get some people that are going to take advantage of these kids. That's just what's going to happen, or not have their best interests in heart, or not necessarily know what the way that the sport or the business works, because this isn't what they do. I know this is a weird aside. Years ago, there was a Major League Baseball manager that went to the studio back when I was a producer, and he's telling me about dealing with, I'll just say the player, Johan Santana, and that he was trying to have Johan Santana pitched into the 6th inning, and the agent calls the GM and says, nope, Johan Santana's done at 5, and you have to yank him even though he's only thrown 70-some-odd pitches. So it was, and so he had to yank Johan Santana out while the guy's dealing because the agent stepped in. You're going to deal with things like that where people are looking at future earning potential, not necessarily just wins and losses, and that's going to drive fans a little nuts.
Yeah, I think it is. But at the end of the day, would you rather have an agent calling you or an emotional parent?
I think probably the agent, right? At least there's no emotion to the problem whatsoever.
Well, neither's a win.
Yeah, no, neither is a win. But I think you would rather have the agent than, because you can at least have the conversation with them. The parent is going to have an invested interest even more so than, because a little bit to some extent, one, they love the kid. Two, someone may look at the kid as a meal ticket and they're going to be a little concerned, and they definitely aren't going to know anything. That's one thing I had to learn in my career over the years was I would get information from players' parents, and then I'd be like, I don't know if this is accurate or not. Then talking to some former players, they were like, oh, dude, our parents don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like, so do not repeat what you hear from a player's parent is what I learned the hard way in that one. So a lot of times the parent's out of the loop, or they're only hearing one side of it. Look, you have kids, Dave. Caleb, I think you have a kid as well. It's sometimes your kid will tell you something and it's their side of the story, and then you'll react to it to a teacher or something like that, and you only had part of the context. So I would say you'd rather have the agent.
Yeah. Caleb, by the way, how are you, sir? I apologize. I didn't say hello yet.
I am good. Thank you, Dave, for acknowledging me. Yes, I do have a kid, but he's only 3 months, so he hasn't learned how to lie to me yet. So
yeah, but he's already running him through like the but what do they call it? The ladder drills, the speed and agility. Where he's already at that point, Will. So we think he's going to be special. Go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. It is time for today's tough question, and it's brought to you by Banks and Jones. Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. BanksandJones.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, here we go. I think we would all agree, and Will, stop me if you don't agree, that Georgia and Alabama are the two toughest teams left on Tennessee's schedule, right?
Yes.
Okay. Given what you have seen, and Will knows ball better than many analysts out there, given what you have seen a month into the season, who is the most dangerous opponent that Tennessee will face that isn't wearing red and or crimson?
I'm still going to say it's Florida, and for a lot of people, they would say Florida because they're the mental block, or Florida has their number or anything like that. Maybe I should buy into that. I don't. I don't buy into that at all. That team's in the blue chip ratio. They have players. If they could now, I don't know if the wheels will be completely off the wagon at that point, but they have a top to bottom physically, let's go do a combine, better roster than Tennessee does. Now, I don't think they're particularly well developed. I think Billy Napier's kind of a doofus and probably doesn't need, he's over his skis, especially to have a job of this magnitude. And he's made some bad defensive situations decisions. But I'll still say Florida because they have players. Arkansas, I like Taylor Green. They've done a great job with him, but I don't think they have players. I mean, they're starting a lot of former SEC teams backups around, up in the front seven and on the offensive line. I think Vanderbilt, while they're improved, Jerry Kill has done a great job coming in and instilling that same thing he did at both Minnesota and New Mexico State. They're going to hit people all over the field, but still Tennessee's bigger, stronger, faster. You were at Media Days, Dave, when those two kids from Vanderbilt came through, and I'm like, oh, son, you're going to get killed. Like, you're small. And then I look at Kentucky. Mark Stoops doesn't – what Mark Stoops likes to do, the way he likes to set up his chessboard and win with ball control and defense, play beamer ball. Against Josh Heupel, you will get crushed doing that. And this year, he doesn't have a quarterback that can throw the ball 40 times like Devin Leary has, Will Levis has. So when I'm putting all those together, I'm just going to say the answer to me is probably going to be Florida, just because if you truly believe it's Jimmy's and Joe's over X's and O's, that's the team with the best roster.
Well, in this day and age, though, with things getting, I would say, more even than they have been in the past in terms of blue chip ratio of rosters. You see them spreading out a lot more. I'm going to say something to you. I'm going to throw it to you, and then I'll let you respond. I think at this point, X's and O's is actually more important than ever. Ooh. And I think that with that in mind, this is why I say Arkansas is their biggest threat. Because while I thought Bobby Petrino was done, I thought his offense was way outdated and never coming back. He's totally proven me wrong this year. He's changed his offense. He gets a lot of credit for that. And because of that, am I crazy for taking Bobby Petrino's X's and O's over anybody's X's and O's on Florida?
No, absolutely. You should take Bobby Petrino. I would say if there's someone that's just that's been in the same household with Bobby Petrino in the last 5 years, I'll take them over the X's and O's at Florida.
Very true. I also wonder, you mentioned the whole notion that it's just a mental game for Tennessee. I don't necessarily think that is. I think, and you said you don't believe that from year to year anyway, but I especially don't believe it with this crew because I think they would have beaten Florida last year with Cooper Mays than they did the year before.
Yeah, I would say that too. Like, part of it last year is people undervalue this a lot. Hitting matters in football. Who's the harder hitting team? Florida was a harder hitting team last year. I know some of the players on last year's team have said, man, that crowd was so loud. It was on top of us. And it was just, we got shook early on and then just kind of couldn't get out of that funk. I would buy that. I do think also Florida hit them in the mouth and they didn't have an answer. I just watched Oklahoma hit Tennessee in the mouth on the road and Tennessee had an answer. So I'm not as concerned about that happening this year, but that's something that don't get me wrong. I believe right now having a decided schematic advantage on the offensive side of the football is king right now in the sport of football, so long as you have a quarterback. But hitting still matters, and it matters a lot. And you see teams that can't handle another team's physicality sometimes. And to me, that's That is the one concern I still have, but I feel like a lot of that concern was alleviated with the way that they handled Oklahoma.
So let's talk about, I know you said you don't believe in the mental block, but let's talk about this with Florida, because where I could bolster your point is that how many of the Tennessee Florida games have you watched where you felt that like the minute something went wrong for Tennessee, they just spiraled? And it just felt like they were in a panic mode, like, oh no, it's Florida doing this to us again. I mean, didn't it feel like that's what happened last year? One thing went wrong early, and then
I had two people send me texts that were there covering the game that said, "West, y'all are peeing down your leg right now," and that was like something of that nature. Remember the Alabama game where they had the botch kickoff, and it was palatable. You could tell that they were shook at that point. I do think this team is mentally more strong than last year's team. Maybe leadership matters. Maybe just being another year older. I mean, people grow up, right? So maybe that's part of it. But it does seem like this team has a little bit more mental toughness to them than last year's team did.
It's a good point. And I think that comes down to the quarterback position, but let's not say the JM word, which I always get in trouble for saying that rhymes with Roe Hilton. But anyway, when I look at Tennessee, and you said hitting matters, and you're right. You and I have known this, and Caleb, you've known this, that Tennessee wants to run the football. Defensively, I don't know that they scared anybody from a physical standpoint. But based off what you've seen this year and knowing Josh Heupel's approach, where does Tennessee rank among the most physical teams in the SEC this year?
I'm still going to put them behind Georgia, right? I am. I'm still going to put them behind Georgia. But outside of Georgia, Alabama, look, if you're just looking at the box score and seeing the highlights, you might think Alabama's just dog walking everybody. They are struggling at times, and then you'll have the big, huge splash play. And then all the, you know what I mean? And it looks like they had a blowout when they really struggled on the lines of scrimmage. Part of that's issues with their offensive line up front, issues in their secondary. I would say Tennessee right now is the second most physical defensive team in the SEC. I would put them ahead of Texas right now as well as far as physicality is concerned. But Tennessee hits people. And when they get hit in the mouth, they respond. And I think that matters. Now, part of that, I think, Keenan Pili being a grown dang man at linebacker, Arian Carter's like, when you talk to him, that's a different dude, right? Like that dude is wired like an NFL player. I don't know if he has the physical ability of like Ray Lewis, but he has that mental thing like that Ray Lewis did, where he's just PO'd for being great. And you got to kind of respect that. And then the guys up front, they can play. But even some kids that are on that front that are good, they're good young men, right? And they get mean when they're on the field right now. Tyree West. Tyree West is as nice of a young man as you will ever meet in your entire life. And if you need somebody to house sit for you while you're on vacation, the first guy I would point to might be Tyree West on Tennessee's roster. He leads the team in sacks and tackles for loss right now. So I just these kids, they're playing hard. Part of that too, and I'll tell you, it's something our buddy Fred White, said to us years ago. When Tennessee wasn't physical and they didn't want to hit and they didn't respond to people hitting him, he always said that's on the strength coach. That's on the strength coach. They haven't created that culture. And so tip your cap to Tennessee's strength coach and strength staff for getting them physically where they need to be, but also making sure mentally they know how to work through tough situations.
Well, I would go to you, but we got to go to Dave real quick, because if you notice, Dave is dodging. Because
how am I dodging?
I've said Arkansas, you have said Florida. Dave hasn't mentioned who he thinks the biggest threat on Tennessee's schedule this is, not named Florida, Bama. This is what he does, by the way. He floats it to everybody else, and then he likes to use it against you when you get it wrong, and he makes you forget that he didn't make a pick at all.
I would take I don't say this a lot. I would take Arkansas because of Petrino. And you referenced Billy Napier. I don't think he knows this, from a hole in the ground. I'm not sure how he stumbled into that win against Mississippi State other than talent. And I feel like the wheels could come off at any moment for Billy Napier. That's why I would say Arkansas, but I'm very hesitant on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. What are your thoughts, Will?
Look, I think again, I think they're well coached. The offensive line is going to be well coached with Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman just made that mistake that we watch a lot of other people make, and he didn't make the adjustment that other people made, where we're going to be more physical. We're going to 12 personnel, and what we're going to do is run the football. Football's evolving this way, and I'm sitting there looking at it saying, no, it's not. I promise you, these kids they can't block that, because these kids don't block that way coming out of high school, and you're going to be handcuffed to that if you're trying to run out of the eye all day long. That ain't going to happen. And so, but Sam Pittman brings in, and I remember KJ Jefferson last year at Media Day saying, we're going to be more balanced. And I texted Eric Kane and Tyler Ivins and said, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Like, oh, KJ, this is going to fail, and I don't know if Sam Pittman's going to be back. Well, they figured it out. Points are king right now. You know what I mean? Go have your receivers run the grass, get them the football, let them make plays for you. And Pittman made that mistake last year, and I think it falls into his biases a little bit as an offensive line coach that he would want the game to get more physical, but that's not where it is. So now they've made an adjustment. They bring in Taylon Green, and Petrino's done an amazing job with them. That guy, he was a great runner at Boise State. Not a great runner. That dude can throw now, and I don't know where in the world that came from, but he can throw. So they're dynamic offensively. I think they're proficient defensively. I do again wonder, though, how talented is that roster if you're getting a bunch of group of 5 guys and backups in the SEC that are the dudes you're having to pull from the transfer portal. And that's the only concern I have with them, but they'll definitely be the best coached team offensively that Tennessee's going to see outside of Georgia and Alabama.
Okay, I'm going to say something that is going to make Caleb shake his head. It's what the H, as hit that like and subscribe button. Will West nice enough to join us from the Sports Animal. You can hear him weekdays from 3 to 7.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Sounds crazy to say. He's the most talented. He's the guy I'd most want to be his agent. But James Pierce is not the most important defender on Tennessee's team. Will, am I insane?
No, you're not. You're not at all. I don't think so at all. I think the linebacking play, I would say Kenan Pili is the number one guy. Part of it, you just have depth up front. And I've always said I would rather have depth. Like if I was putting an NFL roster together, I would much rather have depth than have the one guy, right? Like, and to be able to rotate those dudes in. Tennessee has the depth where you haven't needed a lot out of Pierce. I do think you still want him to show up in a big moment. I think he has affected blocking, but I don't think he's the most important guy right now. I think Kenan Pili probably is the most important guy. Part of that's what that Missouri game is ingrained into my brain. Watching Tennessee's linebackers dive at Cody Schrader's ankles because they didn't want any. And Kenan Pili is not a guy that's not going to step into the alley and hit somebody. He's going to step in the alley and put a shoulder pad in somebody.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Are we undervaluing James's Pierce, and you referenced it, effect on blocking schemes? Because basically everybody else on the other side of Pierce has had a sack. I think there's I counted them up. There's 1,800 of them. And Pierce has had a couple of pressures and almost a sack. So I'm kind of arguing against myself, but I do think he's had a massive effect on these games, even though he doesn't have a sack yet.
No, he's had a very nice effect on the games. He's done a good job setting the edge, in the run game, which is something that I thought last year was a little lacking for him, and I feel like he's figured that side of playing the position out. One thing that Tennessee's defensive line's doing, and Overstreet said it on Pennington's show. I got to tip my cap to him, and then I finally found a way to get some all-22 the last 2 games. They're playing as a unit incredibly well. And so it's not just freelance, get uphill, get north and south, get into the backfield and wreak havoc. They're playing within a unit, funneling everything from a running game into the inside, and that allows the linebackers to make blocks. So he's doing things that are beyond just wreaking havoc, but he has not wreaked the same level of havoc, though, even when he's one-on-one so far for Tennessee. So, and look, the part of that was last year. We saw some of that too. You saw, especially when Tennessee had injuries on the defensive line. And if you remember, they used to do almost like a line change in hockey where they just run the 4 out, run 4 more on to make sure guys were fresh. Once they weren't able to do that because of the injuries they dealt with, you saw James Pierce's numbers dip. And so I do think that it's tough for him to stay on the field for that long. But the way he's affecting the game in the running game, the way he is making them have to have that tight end chip a little bit and bring another person there. Like I've talked to people and even friends of mine that are in the media that are like, oh, he's double triple teamed every block, and I'm like, no, it's not, man. No, that's not happening. And so, but he is still affecting the game, and he's playing within the system of the game, and I think that does still make him incredibly valuable to what Tennessee's doing.
So you would say that the player most behind Tennessee's defensive dominance is Kenan Pili, right?
The player, I would say yes. I would say the player. The problem is, again, I watched Tennessee's defensive line be really good last year. Now, I wouldn't say elite. Right now, they're playing at an elite level. But that's another year of working with Rodney Gardner, another year of being in the strength and conditioning program. But how many times did you watch those linebackers run themselves out of plays last year? Or that pass off, the Alabama game, the third quarter, that handoff with the slot receiver from linebacker to safety. They hit him like 5 times with it in the second half, 3 times that set up scores in the third quarter of that game alone, and it crushed them. The Missouri game, over and over and over again. It's Cody Schrader. I mean, he's just running outside zone, man. We all know what's coming. I'm watching it, and I know what's coming, and I'm sitting at my house in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the linebacker, how does the linebacker not know? Or if he did know, why did he try to run around the play and dive at somebody's ankles? To me, like that, you can be a lead up front, and if your linebackers don't want to hit somebody, you end up in a bad situation. So that's why I think it's peeling.
Okay,
Yes. So,
sorry. Go ahead, Caleb. The poll question is hilarious, by the way, and the response to it, but go ahead.
So, throw this out. Engage me on this. Because I am mostly somewhat with you on Keenan Peely. I totally agree. And by the way, Arian Carter, let's not sleep on him too, who's been just as effective on the outside. What do you think of me saying Jermon McCoy? Because I feel like Jermon McCoy is shutting down one entire side of the field right now for Tennessee, which allows them so much flexibility to do everything else defensively.
It also takes away something that has been a weakness the entire time Josh Heupel's been there, which is one of those corner positions has been just a screen door. You know what I mean? Like all you have to do is just run through it and you'll be fine. And Tennessee, and a lot of it, man, talking to some guys on the staff, one thing that they thought was there were some good players they had. There were smart players. They were just too slow. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, you got corners running 4.7s. That's not going to get it done for you at an SEC level. So I don't think that's unfair to say Jermon McCoy, because again, it's the first year since Heupel's been there. You don't have that one corner position where somebody can just throw the ball up and make a play. Remember the Kentucky game last year when Devin Leary goes nuts. There was one safety they were throwing the ball at every dang play. They were just picking on him. Against A&M. A&M they were just picking on that same safety. Alabama was picking on the other safety. We saw the Kentucky game with the year Levis had the numbers and Tennessee squeaked that one out. They were picking on they're picking on Warren Burrell, right? So it's eliminated. You had the big things. They don't have that weakness, and I think McCoy's probably the strongest of those players.
So my poll question in retrospect is idiotic. Well, Tennessee's most important defender is James Pierce, Keenan Peely, Will Brooks, someone else. I wanted to see if Will Brooks would get a vote. He has not gotten one vote. Keenan Peely running away with it. Give Will Brooks some love, somebody. James Pierce, number 2, someone else. That someone else would include Arian Carter. And I'm 99% sure you pointed out to me, and just an off-the-record conversation, so we don't have to go in depth with it, but that Carter – actually with an older player was at an event and this guy was not paying attention like he should. And Arian Carter was like, get your stuff together. That was you that told me that, right?
Yeah. That was, it was at an event. A bunch of players were there and a senior last year was kind of being a knucklehead, not doing anything stupid or bad or anything like that, or criminal or like just being kind of silly. And Arian Carter popped him and said, look a man in the eye and talk straight when you talk to a man. When he was talking to me, and I'm like, oh, that's a freshman, dude. That's what I'm saying. That dude has a different level of mental energy, I think, and focus than most humans out there in the world have.
Yeah. I don't know what was wrong with that guy, Caleb, but portions of the program are brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com, Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. Use the promo code HOOK for 10% off, HOOK for 10% off. Caleb, I'm sure that you're not affected by anything at this current moment, so why don't you take it away?
I'm affected by Dayquil and lots of it.
Yeah. we got Caleb playing hurt today, so
I have the, y'all know that being a man with a cold is as painful as childbirth, right? So it's like
absolutely true.
I mean, like,
man, cold's real.
Man cold is real. It is worse than childbirth. I told my wife that the other day, and she didn't agree. But it's okay. So let's get to the defensive line, because Tennessee's defensive line is deep. It's elite. It's athletic. The interior defensive line. What do you think of saying maybe Amari Thomas is the engine of that whole group that makes it go? Because he's the lead. He is the leader of the group. I mean, I don't know any time a defensive tackle has gone to SEC Media Days twice, maybe John Henderson back in the day, but I'm not even sure of that. What do you, even though he may not be the most physically gifted, would you say he's the most important in terms of galvanizing all the guys to play together the way they do?
I think so, because I do think part of it is when Omar Norman Lott got there and they saw that, hey, he's better at interior pass rush. When Amari Thomas saw that, he said, hey, everybody listen to this guy and show us the things you don't know. Things like that, like having that kind of leadership, I think absolutely matters. Now, again, I think it's the depth of dudes, not necessarily the single dude. But if you wanted to point to one guy, the leadership, everybody getting behind that one guy, I think is invaluable for Tennessee. Part of it, too, though, is look at the guys they've had that we kind of didn't talk a lot about the last 2 years. They were Amari Thomas was a highly sought-after guy, right? And then, I mean, Tyree West, you took him from Georgia. You know what I mean? Like, he was going to go to Georgia. So you have talented dudes that other teams wanted and other schools wanted. Frankly, James Pierce might have been the one that had the fewest committable offers from big-time universities. If you look at the recruiting on that front line, I know, Dave, you guys are more into recruiting probably than I am.
Not anymore.
but it's that's a talented group, and they do get behind Amari Thomas and they follow what he says, and it kind of sets the standard for what they're going to do and what they're going to be. And I think when they've seen a guy who's in his 5th, 6th year, I think Amari Thomas has been there since about 2017. But when they see a guy like that say, hey, let's do this, I think everybody does. I don't want to say fall in line. I don't mean it like insulting at all, but I do think they get in line behind what Amari Thomas does. And I think it speaks to the work that they put in, how they listen to each other, playing to each other, playing to their own strengths. I do think Amari Thomas is the one that I would point to.
Okay. Now, what about, I want to make an argument and you can call me out on it, but you have a secondary that hasn't been tested yet. Will Brooks is the back end of that. He made an incredible play against NC State that took the soul from the Wolfpack. Just for funsies, Will Brooks is Tennessee's most important defensive player, last line of defense. What do you say, Peyton Manning?
They're like, that is total bullshit.
Okay, well, Will, what do you think?
No, man. And look, I God bless him. So here's the other side of it too. We haven't seen Tennessee you're right. We haven't seen Tennessee secondary tested. At this point, though, I don't think anyone needs to apologize for Tennessee or where Tennessee is, because NC State was a ranked team and you went and played them. Well, all of a sudden, Grayson McCall can't run the thing the offensive coordinator wants to run. And so, in that Western Carolina game, the 4th quarter, they adjusted to run what Grayson McCall can do. Against Tennessee, nope, this is what we run. And every game since then, and it's gone super well for them since that happened. So it was like you were tested against Grayson McCall. Kent State is literally the worst team in FBS football. Then you take on Oklahoma, and they bench Jackson Arnold, and he struggled for most of the year. We did see in the first half of that Tulane game what Jackson Arnold can do, and I don't know why. Again, Seth Luttrell and Brent Venables didn't adjust to that, but they didn't adjust to that. So the secondary hasn't been tested, and I think also that pass rush does not give people a lot of time. So if you have long developing routes and things like that, it's going to be a problem. So, but I think they're good. I don't know how great they are. They're really nice in press. If you're looking at the All-22, that's one thing that kind of like stood out to me last week when I first looked at the All-22 was, man, they're pretty strong in press. So I think that's good, but I don't know how good the secondary necessarily is because, I mean, the 2 quarterbacks that they faced that were supposed to be good have been benched at this point.
All right, but 3-7 on the Sports Animal in Knoxville, and Will, we certainly appreciate you. Be good, man.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Also, shout out to my dog for not barking this time.
Have a good one.
Did you drug him like I used to drug my kids with Benadryl when we go to Florida? It's true. I mean, yeah, people can judge me if you want, but when you got a 2- and a 4-year-old screaming on a 12-hour trip, what are you going to do?
Yeah, do Benadryl. That's what you do.
Thank you, Will.
Yep.
Will's not judging me, and I appreciate that. Caleb, you'll be in that situation one day. Let's unpack a little bit of that for a second. We probably are not giving Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson enough credit, because when they bring pressure, the key is for those guys to play man press and stop the opposing receiver from getting open ultra quick, right? That's the
Yes.
way to beat blitzing and man pressure. So I can't tell you that I know how good the safeties are right now. And I was joking a little bit about Will Brooks. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Vote on our poll question. We'll get a better one up there. But I don't know how good the safeties are, but I feel pretty certain that Tennessee has a top 25% in the SEC of cornerbacks, top quarters of corners.
Yeah, and it's really funny because it somewhat reminds me of the Chavis defenses back in the 90s where they wanted their corners on an island. I'm sure if you remember, right?
Yes.
And they put a lot of pressure on them. During that time, though, they went more for ball hawking safeties, and they didn't really expect. I mean, honestly, you never really thought of great corners during the Chavis year. There were a couple like Jabari Greer and Dwayne Goodrich, but not that many. Honestly, it was more the safeties I feel like that stood out. Whereas this time around, it's the corners. You're right that are standing out with Ricky Gibson and Javon McCoy, not the safeties.
Well, is that because the corners were so good for the most part, they weren't being challenged as much?
I just look at the NFL though, and I mean, like outside of Jabari Greer, Dwayne Goodrich, and Jonathan Wade, how many corners for Tennessee went to the NFL under? Most of them were safeties, weren't they? Under the Chavis era.
Well, not to date myself, but they had a coach that I was told by an NFL source that when Jabari Greer showed up, they told him, they said, you need to take a year off and you need to forget everything you've learned in college because you've been taught completely wrong. And if you look back at his career, he didn't play much as a rookie, but then played the next year. And he had a really good career in the NFL. I think there was there's no need to call him out years later. But I think there was a coaching issue there. As Philip Fulmer used to be too loyal to his assistants. I wondered that about Josh Heupel when he was elevating guys. But now I think we can all say with what the tight ends have done, Alec Ablin's been a good fit. And Joey Halsley was not the reason Tennessee's offense struggled last year.
That's true. That still somewhat fuels my point, though, which is they really just didn't care about the quality of their cornerbacks during the Chavis years because they didn't think the cornerbacks were going to be that relevant.
Oh, I got you.
And now maybe they don't care about the quality of the safeties that much. And the thought being, if the corners can keep the receiver from getting open for just a certain amount of time, they know they'll get the pressure.
So you're saying the safety is the typical old safety when we think of a safety, and that is don't let everything go over the top, because that's the way football used to be played. Now you rock down a safety as Oklahoma did throughout the game against Tennessee. And there were times where Oklahoma's strong safety was as much a linebacker as he was a defensive back.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I would say it's kind of like that. Which is funny you say that because that's very similar to what Monty Kiffin did with Eric Berry back in the day, where he ran a lot of cover ones, I felt like, in 2009.
True, but don't you think that Eric Berry could play defensive end and be okay?
Literally, Eric Berry could play any position outside of defensive tackle and offensive lineman. And
I mean, he would struggle against the run, obviously, but he would get to the quarterback in pass rush situations.
He also could have played running back, wide receiver, maybe tight end, definitely quarterback.
Yeah, he played quarterback in high school, and he was remarkably good. The show represented Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. This day in Tennessee sports history in 30 seconds. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com. All right, so on our poll question earlier, we asked the question, and this one surprised me a little bit. Are you okay with players having agents? Yes, it's business in the NIL age, 72%. No, these are student athletes, 27%. I agree, but I have to be honest with you. I'm surprised by the response. You?
I think people who listen to our show have somewhat similar views to ours, and particularly with the conversations we've all had. We've all come around to this. Remember this, Dave, when we started this 2 years ago, I may have even said, I don't know if I want players having agents, but I think having seen the way NIL's operated, I've kind of come more and more, I'm much more pro player now than even I was when NIL started.
Okay.
And I
I
think
also think we have an audience with a much higher intellect than a lot of those out there. And I'm not just saying that to be nice to you guys out there, but some of the things you say lead me to columns. And yeah, you're really a really good audience, and you were smart not to take the bait on this. Tennessee's most important defender is Keenan Pili at 67%, James Pierce at 16% pity votes. Will Brooks gets just 3%. Someone else, 12%. Keenan Pili is the third most important player on Tennessee's football team, behind Nico and behind Cooper Mays. As a matter of fact, I think we underestimate his loss last year when Tennessee's linebackers were running around like chickens with their heads cut off and didn't know what to do. It wasn't just his presence. It was getting everyone in the right position. Keenan Pili is a fantastic player. And I have trouble thinking of a linebacker in the past 20 years that I would take over him. And that includes Jalen Reeves-Maybin.
I'm with you mostly. He's an incredible player. The only linebacker you might take over him is the Mike linebacker they have on that team, because Arian Carter is incredible. I mean, this dude is amazing. I know you said he missed a couple of assignments in the first quarter of last game, but his athleticism is off the charts, even more than Keenan Pili. And I feel like Arian Carter is the first linebacker. Again, to go back to the peak Chavis years, do you remember when Tennessee would have those linebackers that they could get away with over pursuing because they would correct so quickly?
Yes.
That's Arian Carter. Do you notice that?
Yeah. I do. I think Arian Carter is fantastic. I think he's very smart, puts himself in the right position. If you look at that goal line play he made, he knew what was coming. It is time for This Day in Tennessee Sports History, and it's brought to you by Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. Hound Dogs of Knoxville. The link's right below, hdknoxville.com, hdknoxville.com. This Day in Tennessee Sports History is...
On this day in 2005, Tennessee came back to beat LSU in Baton Rouge 30-27 in the only bright spot of a really bad year. Everybody remembers that game. It was postponed because of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, so it was a Monday night game. Tennessee was on the road, and everybody tried to make it was Les Miles' SEC home opener. Everybody wanted the storyline of LSU winning at home. They jump out 21-0 with Eric Gaines at quarterback. Eric Gaines gets thrown into the goalpost on a pick six. Tennessee brings in Rick Clausen, and Rick Clausen leads Tennessee back to beat the school that he transferred out of 30-27 in overtime.
New poll question, which is up there, and that is, are Vols more likely to go 12-0 or 9-3? I have trouble seeing 9-3. 12-0 would take something pretty special. I think Tennessee can beat Alabama with what they have going for them right now, but I'm not so sure about Georgia. Has your big picture prediction changed in terms of Tennessee's record based off the first month of the season?
No, but my big picture projection was them at 11-1, and it's them at 11-1 still. And I had them only losing to Georgia on the road. And I don't think that's changing.
Okay. So, well, that you didn't answer the question quite yet. Not that I want you to.
I knew you didn't want me to. That's why I avoided answering it.
That's good. So we'll share. Vols more likely to go 12-0 or 9-3. We discuss both, and it will be right after this. Stay tuned. Off the Hook Sports. Give me just about 2 minutes.
5th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, now saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Hi, I'm Rick Terry, and we at Rick Terry Jewelry Designs pride ourselves in the highest quality craftsmanship from a family-owned business here in Knoxville for over 35 years. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we also take pride in being an affordable option for all your game day accessories, especially those fire opals. At Rick Terry Jewelry Designs, we want to be your jeweler every day and especially on game day. Go Vols!
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
When the lights turn on and the game begins, you need a team you can rely on. Varner Ford in Clinton's strong lineup of vehicles is crafted with the same dedication and hard work that drives our community. Experience quality and value in this pre-owned 2018 Ford Mustang Convertible, 24,550, 2023 Ford Bronco Sport Big Bend, 29,789, 2022 Ford Escape SEL all-wheel drive, 26,975. Local you trust, pre-owned vehicles you can afford. Varner Ford, built for the game.
With our brand new location on Emory Road, Eye Care Optical is bringing East Tennessee's best eye care to your neighborhood. Doctors Johnston and Combs offer unmatched expertise and care without a trip to Knoxville. Eye Care Optical, now in Powell.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys. Play to win, banksjones.com.
He tries very hard. The Dave Hooker Show.
All I know is when we win a game, it's a team win. When we lose a game, it's a team loss.
A presentation of Off the Hook Sports.
Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable!
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Alrighty, welcome back to the program. He's Caleb Calhoun. I am Dave Hooker. Coming up, our Heisman watch. And why Tennessee is so good, it might prevent Nico from being a true Heisman finalist. We'll discuss why here momentarily, but I don't think anybody would be upset with that if Tennessee won a national championship. That's not going to bother anybody. Hit that like and subscribe button, and feel free to shoot us a comment on the chat box there, as we certainly appreciate that. And that's brought to you by our friends at Peak IV Hydration, South Knoxville and Sevierville. Wide range of IV treatments designed to help you feel your best. PeakIVHydration.com. Fast, effective, 105-star reviews, and they've got the patches that you can order online. Caleb, the poll question is up, and it's a toughie. Are Vols more likely to go 12-0 or 9-3? You begin. What say you? You have to pick one.
This one's so easy for me. It's 12-0. They are way more likely to go 12-0 than they are 9-3. Significantly more so. Let's look at their schedule. Will was just talking with us, and he said Florida's the toughest team they'll face only because of their roster top to bottom. But then he pointed out they do have Billy Napier. If Florida's the toughest team you're going to face outside of Alabama and Georgia on your schedule this year, you got a really easy schedule. So 10-2 is the bench line. So what we're really asking is this. Is Tennessee more likely to beat Alabama and Georgia or lose to one of the other teams? I think it's obvious they're more likely to beat Alabama and Georgia because, quite honestly, I'm not so sure they won't be favored against Alabama in a month.
Okay. Here's the problem with your argument is that I don't think you're taking into account what has happened at this point this season. And that is that offensive line, which I said had to stay healthy, has not stayed healthy. So if you make me choose between the two, which that's what the question does, that's what makes it fun, bank on it. It's 9-3. Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank. Commercial Bank, member FDIC. Life made better. Commercial Bank creates positive experiences for every customer every day with better solutions, better technology. Commercial Banks for personal and business. Commercial Bank, life made better. As good as we talk about Tennessee's defensive front, Arkansas actually has more sacks. What happens if they get pressure on Nico against a banged up offensive line? That suddenly, to me, feels like a losable game on the road. I don't think Tennessee will lose it, but I think it's losable. I also think that if something like that were to happen and Tennessee thought to a man in the locker room that they wouldn't be able to make the college football playoff, it could have a snowball effect. So I don't think Tennessee's going 12-0 because of their lack of depth on the offensive line. I don't really think they're going 9-3 either, but I'll say bank on it. That's more likely than 12-0 because this offensive line is already hurt, and that was leading in to the fourth game of the season. Bank on It, brought to you by Commercial Bank.
Dave, you are so wrong.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank.
One, their
What
offensive
makes us
line's going to be
different
healthy
from other
by the end of the
banks?
bye. Josh Heupel said he
We
expects both
understand
players
that
back
every
against
customer has
Arkansas.
unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same
I
box as
think
the next
Tennessee
person or business.
Tennessee just beat Oklahoma
Whether
with
it's
the big
purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life made better.
All right, tell me I'm wrong, Caleb.
One, Tennessee's offensive line is going to be healthy by Arkansas. Josh Heupel said yesterday he expects both offensive linemen back. And those y'all heard me on the mic. Yeah, Dave, there was a glitch or delay on my screen that said, Dave, you're so wrong when we went to commercial break. And I think people heard me say, Dave, you're so wrong. Yes. So Dave, you are so wrong. Dave, Tennessee is going to be fully healthy on the offensive line by the Arkansas game. John Campbell and Lancer will both be back. Let's say one of them goes down. They can afford to go without one of them because I think they actually do think they could rotate in Larry Johnson at this point to be serviceable. The problem with the Oklahoma game was that they had both players out and they were facing the best pass rush they're going to face all year. That's not going to happen every game. So with that in mind, I got to be honest, I think they're going to have an easy time with Arkansas because they're going to be fully healthy. And then they play Florida that has no defense, so they don't have to worry about getting pressure in that, people pressuring them in that situation. That's another reason, by the way, that Arkansas is a tougher game, though. You're right. They get more sacks. Florida has no defensive line, so Tennessee's offense is going to have a very easy time. It's only going to come down to Alabama and Georgia at that point. And there are still some questions about Alabama's edge rusher. So I think Tennessee's actually in great shape. I think Tennessee could easily go 12-0, and not easily, but I think it's a very realistic possibility. I don't think it's crazy to think they can beat Georgia and Athens this year if a few things bounce their way. Is Georgia a better team? Yes. Do they have a better roster? Yes. But I mean, what would you give that game, Dave? Like a 65% chance for Georgia, maybe?
At home, given that Georgia typically plays to the level of competition, and I believe that they will think Tennessee is a high level of competition, I would right now give Georgia a 75% chance of winning that game.
All right, I give them 65. But what you're saying is 1 in 4 times Tennessee would win. So on the right day, Tennessee can win in Athens, is what you're saying.
And that to me is just the health of the offensive line, not just pregame, but during the game. If they show up healthy and they are healthy, then yes, I think it's more like 60-40 Georgia, even at home. But if they're the least bit banged up, there is just no depth, Caleb. You saw it out there. I mean, Larry Johnson is going to end up, in my opinion, hopefully you're telling me I was right, a year and a half from now. I think he's going to be an all-SEC player eventually. But I don't think that time is now. I mean, Josh Heupel even admitted that they had a lot of work to do on him to raise his strength level. And Cooper said he did all right in pass protection. You can You can watch the Vol Report, brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. 50 years in East Tennessee. And Cooper said on the Vol Report that pass pro, he was pretty good, which it's hard to get a compliment as a teammate from Cooper. So that says something. But can you run the football behind him? No. I think if he's out there, Tennessee is a run left team, and that makes them pretty predictable. That would be my biggest concern, is that Larry Johnson's not up to snuff. Listen, if you tell Dane Davis, and don't be surprised if they do this, Dane, just focus on left tackle. Hurd's a bit of an enigma. We don't know what's going to happen. I think he'll be fine at left tackle. I think the problem, I've been around these guys before, Caleb, the problem with Dane Davis on Saturday is he's had to learn how to play every single position on Tennessee's offensive line. And it is just like Cooper said it best. Go in and brush your teeth with your left hand. It just feels different. Everything's different. I think it's very underrated by the common fan that says, oh, you played right offensive guard, you can play left offensive guard. Well, Dane Davis has been asked to play every single position on Tennessee's football team. And I would think that he's the first backup, not Larry Johnson. Had John Campbell Jr. gone down and Lance Hurd still in, I think Dane Davis goes in there. I could be wrong on that. But when you're the backup at every single position, it's almost unfair. You never reach your potential, ever. Now, if he were a sophomore, then I would say he's going to settle into a position, but he's not. He's about done.
Dave, you've convinced me further Tennessee's going to be fine. If they zone in on Dane Davis at left tackle, and if what you tell me is true that Larry Johnson was fine in pass pro, that's all I care about for the tackles. Run blocking is not that important for the tackles in this system because every run play is a vertical play. So
it's true. They're asked to put a hat on a man more so than dominate a man. I'll give you that. Maybe I'm talking myself into 12-0.
Yeah. So with what you're telling me is true, if they do it, if Larry Johnson was fired in pass pro, here's what I'm guessing was happening. They were moving Dane Davis around because he was just going to be their backup tackle, period, right?
Or guard.
I
mean, I until I see Sham Umarov run out there in front of Dane Davis or the Satterwhite kid run out there and because Cooper goes down, I believe Dane Davis is the backup at every position. I mean,
okay, if they focus him on the left side and because they think that Larry Johnson can pass pro on the right, then I think they're even in better shape. Because again, it's not a big deal if they can't. If Larry Johnson's fine in pass pro but can't run block, who cares? That has no impact on Tennessee's running game at all. And so the only question does become then, can Dane Davis lock down another spot? And that's only a question if Lance Hurd and John Campbell go down again. What are the chances that, I mean, again, I think John Campbell's going to be thoroughly fine. I'm talking myself into maybe 12-0 as possible as 10-2 at this point.
Our question on the message board, because this is something that needs to be addressed. Tennessee's not in this position because Dane Davis is a bad football player. Okay, if Dane Davis, who I know struggled Saturday against Oklahoma, if Dane Davis had been able to focus on one position, if Dane Davis had worked that position throughout his college career, I believe he would be a more than serviceable offensive lineman. I think he'd be pretty good, as a matter of fact. But Game No Bueno asked, do we have any offensive line starters that Josh recruited out of high school? Caleb, so he went out and got Lance Hurd, but that's not out of high school. Cooper Mays was already there. I guess it would be Larry Johnson you would have to get to before it's a true high schooler that Josh Heupel recruited.
Look, this has been one of my biggest criticisms with Josh Heupel's talent evaluation. However, caveat, I think a lot of these linemen he signed has been for depth and depth alone because he has not been able to be selective on the line. When you inherit a roster as obliterated as Tennessee's was in 2021, you can't really afford to be selective over who you sign. And so he just took guys, I think it was throwing pizza at the wall. You know what I mean? Or what's the saying? Throwing a bunch of spaghetti noodles at the wall and seeing what sticks. And
I just say a bunch of stuff, whatever. But yeah, throwing spaghetti. That's a way to determine like if it's done or not or something.
Right.
So now they don't have a guy that Tennessee has recruited straight out of high school. Now, I'm going to defend Josh Heupel for a second. I do believe this. I believe that Josh Heupel going against Georgia and going against Saban's Alabama teams, they're going to lose most of those battles. So I think he had to pick up guys like Larry Johnson III, Esquire Jr., and I think he had to pick up and run with guys like Cooper Mays, who wasn't a highly recruited guy, and develop them over time. So I give Josh Heupel an A+ in who he's developed, but you can't give him any better than a C in who he's recruited. And really, the jury's still out. The grades haven't been graded.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's been a big concern for Heupel the whole time was talent evaluation, and that's been all over the field. The one place where he's recruited well, it seems like, has been defensive line, but you could give more credit to Rodney Garner for that. So, look, that's a big question with Josh Heupel, and it still is a big question with Josh Heupel. The one thing I may say is that, they've had two starters since Josh Heupel's been there, John Spraggins and Cooper Mays, and he's been able to keep those, which is a big deal. They went for some quick transfers, John Campbell, Andre Carrig. And I think the recruiting on the line in the era of the transfer portal, I think that was always going to be their focus, was to try to find starters in the portal until they could recruit these top-notch linemen. I mean, now they have David Sanders committed for next year, which is going to be a big pickup. So I think now they're starting to recruit the highly touted linemen that they want to get. But again, similar to the secondary, they haven't been able to be selective over who they recruited out of high school.
That's true. The man speaks the truth. It is this day in Tennessee football history. Is that where we are?
No, we already did it. It's stat of the day.
Right. Stat of the day is now stat of the day, brought to you by our good friend Medicare Misty, licensed in over 40 states. So wherever you're watching, she is probably able to help you, and her services are free. Stat of the day brought to you by Medicare Misty.
I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
All right, so I do want to get to something later in the program. I'm going to reroute a little bit, and that is, are you concerned about James Pierce? Because he doesn't have a sack. So we'll get to that a little bit later, but I'm curious where the stat of the day might take us. I have one, Caleb, but you go right ahead, sir. But I've got one that I think is pretty good concerning Tennessee's defensive linemen and how many played on Saturday. Go ahead.
Okay. Tennessee has given up 28 points through 4 games this year. That is the fewest amount of points they've given up through their first 4 games since guess.
98.
No. They gave up 33 points in the first game of that year to Syracuse.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. I was just thinking of a really good team. 2001.
Nope. 1966 was the last time they gave up this few points through 4 games. The last time they gave up this few points through 4 games and started 4-0 was 1951.
Wow, that was a national championship year. I just picked the wrong one.
Yeah, it was. It was a national title season. Yep, they went 4-0. They started the year 4-0 in 51, won the national title. They actually ran the table. Started the year ranked number 1, ended the year ranked number 1.
Okay, I'm going to put my stat of the day in the message board. How about that?
Okay.
So there it is right there. Boom goes the dynamite. Yeah, Travis says, didn't you write a book about 98? Yes, I did. No, I'm not sleeping on Larry Johnson. I think he is a future star. Okay, so there you go. Feels like 51. List of defensive linemen played. How about this? 12 defensive linemen played. Not on special teams. That would actually be 14 if you counted just the position. I'm not talking about special teams. I'm talking about 12 real balls played real time minutes on the defensive line. That is phenomenal. The list is in the message board. Bryson Eason, 36 snaps. Elijah Simmons, 25 snaps. James Pierce Jr., 50 snaps. Dominic Bailey, 48 snaps. Amari Thomas, 26 snaps. Joshua Joseph, 30. Omar Norman Lott, 21. Jason Jenkins, 5, which included the safety. Jackson Moy, who I still believe is going to be a great player for Tennessee, 15. Tyree West, 20. Caleb Herring, 6. Davin Hobbs, 11. I will be honest with you. I did not completely believe Tennessee's coaches when they said that they were going to play a lot of players up front, because a lot of coaches say that, Caleb, for 2 reasons. Number one, you get the second stringer, you get those guys continue to work hard thinking that they're going to play. And you might do it against the Chattanoogas of the world or the Kent States of the world, but you surely don't do it against the Oklahomas of the world. Yet they did. They're that comfortable in those guys 3D. The other thing that you use that for, that you say that type of thing, is you say it for recruiting. If you come here and you practice well, you're going to play. It doesn't matter what the depth chart looks like. I thought that could be a possibility before the season. In retrospect, Peyton Manning says,
they're like, that is total bullshit.
And he would be right. I'm a doubting Thomas when it comes to coaches. I've been lied to many, many times. I didn't think I was being lied to, but I thought there was some gamesmanship there, Caleb. So that completely changes everything in my mind. It's a matter of fact, more so than the 3 games combined against Chattanooga, Kent State, and NC State. The fact that they were willing to run that many guys out there on the road, that would be my stat of the day. And most of them in double digits. But how are you even that adept at rotation where Jason Jenkins gets in there to register a safety? You have to give Rodney Garner a lot of credit too, Caleb, because typically the position guys, the position coaches, are in charge of who goes in and out of the game. And we all know from what happened with a certain Chuck Smith at LSU, what can happen if you send too many dudes out there at the same time. It can cost you a game.
Yeah, that was a funny one in 2010. It's Chuck Smith saved Les Miles' job, honestly. I guarantee you if Tennessee doesn't run 13 men out, Les Miles is fired that Monday. But interestingly enough, I'm shocked with you on this. This wasn't one of those times where you pull your starters. Is that fair to say, Dave? This was never, even though the game was always in hand, it was never a game where you pull your starters, right? So it's not like you're just going deep to your bench to go to your bench against Oklahoma. You're doing that because you want to run that deep rotation and keep everybody fresh. And that's shocking. And I don't know if I've ever seen, you could tell me, I don't know, but I've never seen a Tennessee defensive line this deep ever since I've been covering Tennessee.
I was thinking about that. And I covered a defensive line where Darwin Walker was a very good backup. I've covered defensive lines where they've gone legitimately 4 deep. Now, Dan Brooks, former defensive line coach, who's as old school as you get, he'd come out there and he goes, you want to go 8 deep defensive tackle? Well, I'm sure you do. And I would like to weigh 185 pounds. But those aren't the facts of life. The facts of life, you don't have that many people on your roster that are that developed. I am telling you, this is a once in a generation type of defensive line. Because next year, Simmons will be gone. Omari will be gone. You think James Pierce will be gone. So, yes, this is not going to happen again, probably in our lifetimes, that they're legitimately that deep.
Yeah, unless this is a philosophy that they're going to have down the road for a long time. And I don't know if they will, but this is.
But you can have that philosophy, but if you don't have the guys to do it, you're not going to keep running them out there.
Well, let's think about this. And this is where we have to give the biggest testament to Rodney Garner, because we're always forgetting about this. But this is Rodney Garner putting together this line now. And then I go back to the 90s when Tennessee was at their best from like 97 to 2001. And I mean, we're talking, they had the greatest interior defensive line in history in John Henderson and Albert Haynesworth. They turned out Pro Bowl defensive ends and Sean Ellis and Leonard Little. They had NFL players like Darwin Walker. Those were all players developed or recruited by Rodney Garner, looking back. And that was a historical run of elite defensive linemen. And now all of a sudden you're doing it again with not the same level of elite defensive linemen, but just going so deep. Because, I mean, I'll say this, Dave, and let's take those 5 players: Darwin Walker, Sean Ellis, Leonard Little, John Henderson, and Albert Haynesworth. With the exception of James Pierce, is anybody on this defensive line better than any of those 5 guys?
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
But they go 12 deep, and so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. If Elijah Simmons would focus on football, eat a little bit less, and not worry about singing as much, I think that he could be that.
He showed some Did you see how he blew up a play last
Yeah,
game?
he's down 15 pounds, but is he going to do that moving forward in the NFL? Has he carried so much weight to this point that his body's beat up?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, don't look back if you're listening, Elijah, but hit the like and subscribe button. But you may have missed a golden opportunity by being too big and getting too injured too often. All right, Nico Iamaleava, is he even in the Heisman race anymore? Should he be? We'll discuss odds, what I think is going to shake out in just 2 minutes. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions. Commercial Bank. Life made better.
Sports Treasures in North Knoxville is one of the South's largest sports cards and memorabilia dealers, featuring over 10 million sports cards from vintage to modern. Sports Treasures carries a full line of hobby boxes, singles, autographed memorabilia, Tennessee Vol collectibles, fan cave decorations, and so much more. See a museum full of collectibles at Sports Treasures, 4819 North Broadway in Fountain City, and Sports Treasures on Facebook. Sports Treasures, where the real sports fan goes to shop.
When the lights turn on and the game begins, you need a team you can rely on. Varner Ford in Clinton's strong lineup of vehicles is crafted with the same dedication and hard work that drives our community. Step up your game in this 2025 Ford Explorer 4x4 Active, $46,529. 24 Ford Big Bend Bronco 4-door, $40,949. 24 Ford F-150 Super Crew 4x4 STX, $46,214.
Local you trust, performance you can afford. Varner Ford, built for the game.
If all the natural beauty around here looks a little fuzzy to you, you may want to consider LASIK vision correction from the Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Now with 2 Sevierville locations to serve you, East Tennessee's best eye care is more convenient than ever.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at nfc1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that.
Joe Neubert Collision Center.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorneys.
Excuse me, Your Honor.
Play to win, banksjones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Welcome back to the program. Some breaking news that we want to address, and we'll get into it deeper here in a moment. I want to talk some Nico. I mean, that set up, and I know a lot of people are online that will want to discuss that. So, Caleb, first of all, recruiting news is what?
So, elite offensive lineman Douglas Utu has flipped from Tennessee to Oregon. Utu was a 4-star, 6'4", 317 pounds, have been committed to Tennessee since June. He's out of Bishop Gorman High School in Vegas, which is where Cedric Tillman went to school. Member of the 2025 class, flipped to Oregon this morning.
Okay, so we will discuss that a little more here in just a second. But first, I want to get to this. Can you pull up the odds for Nico Iamaleava and the Heisman Trophy? Which
I have to do it on my phone because of the location rules and things like that.
Okay, go right ahead.
So
He's going to pull.
now.
Caleb's going to pull that up. Nico's Heisman odds. What are they? And I think that we need to. Caleb and I were both very high. He was higher on Nico than I was, but I think we need to address the fact that Nico, it might not be possible for him to be a true Heisman candidate with the way Tennessee is going to play some games. I think that Nico's going to get plenty of shots downfield throughout the season, but there might be a Georgia game or an Alabama game that they try to win like they did on Saturday against Oklahoma with conservative play calling and a very aggressive defense. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Nico would tell you he'd rather get to the college football playoff than he would win a Heisman Trophy. So let me ask you this question: is how much of your thoughts on Nico winning the Heisman changed, Caleb, now that we've seen Tennessee's offense not look very Heupel-like?
Well, every dime you give me for Quincy's college fund is going more to add to my bet on Nico winning the Heisman at the end of the year. So that's how much it's changed.
So you're still in.
Still in. Guys, Nico, Vegas is not letting up. As a matter of fact, Vegas keeps moving in the direction of Nico each week. Nico is now 4th on the Heisman list. You want to know the 3 ahead of him?
Yes.
Cam Ward, number 1. I can't debate that with what he's done so far. Jackson Dart, number 2.
Okay, he's the best player over Cam Ward, but go ahead.
Jalen Milroe, number 3.
Okay, he's not going to be there at the end of the year, I don't think.
Jalen Milroe is not going to be there. Ole Miss is going to Ole Miss probably, which you and I both agree, Dave. What does Ole Miss do with Lane Kiffin? They blow out everybody that's not a team ranked higher than them. And then when they face a team ranked higher than them, they look awful.
Okay.
And I think so once they lose their key games, that'll hurt Jackson Dart. So it could come down to Nico and Cam Ward. And what if Tennessee is 12-0, what we talked about earlier? You don't think doing that in the SEC will matter more than what Cam Ward did at Miami? And so the question then becomes, will the offense find its groove? Well, people who are significantly lower on the offense than I am, not that they're low, but they don't believe the hype I have bought into with Nico, still think the offense is going to get it figured out. I mean, Jimmy Hyams was on our show yesterday, Dave, and he said that as the season goes on, the offense is going to look more like the 2022 offense. Well,
yeah. Okay. A couple things. He's assuming that and I think I'm not putting words in Jimmy's mouth. I mean, he's assuming the offensive tackles are going to get healthy, right?
Yes, which I think they will.
Yeah, so we think they will. But I'm going to say no. I don't think he's a true Heisman candidate because Josh Heupel is a better coach than Lane Kiffin. Because Josh Heupel can win in more ways than Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin may be a better offensive mind. That is up for debate. I think him and Heupel are right up at the top. But Josh Heupel is a better overall coach. Lane Kiffin is just paying players that he's seen do it in college. Heupel's done some evaluating and development. The two approaches are very different. And at the end of the day, if you lose a game somewhere along the way that you shouldn't, your team is more likely to become fractured the way Kiffin did it than Heupel. So I'm not comparing them as head coaches. I'd take Heupel. But the offensive minds are pretty equal. Josh Heupel is going to be more than willing to win a game 20-10 if that's the way the game unfolds. And I listened to his press conference yesterday, and he said every game ends up unfolding in some particular fashion. So let's say, for instance, that Tennessee did not get the ball right back after those 2 turnovers, and Oklahoma is up 10 points in the first half, which is very doable, right? When you have 2 strip sacks.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think what Josh Heupel would have done in that situation is gone 12 personnel, 2 tights, and he would have challenged Oklahoma's cornerbacks about double the amount of times he did, which I think was just about 4. So I think he would have been aggressive down the field. But I think if he gets in a situation where he feels like, hey, I can slow the game down, which is that many fewer snaps that an offensive lineman can get hurt. If I can slow the game down, it may hurt my offensive stats, which I think he's loved too much at the past at times, but it can win him a championship. So as much as he loves Nico, he's going to love a championship more. Caleb, so I no longer think that he's a realistic Heisman candidate. And by that, I say you end up in New York, which can be 3, can be 5 people, depends on how the voting goes. So I'm not so sure that I believe that anymore.
I still think he is, and I think he's going to, again, it was a different type of flow of game against Oklahoma. There were going to be points where they have to air it out with Nico this year. There's going to be times where teams turn it into a shootout. And I think there will be, in those moments, you're going to need Nico to step up. And I think he will. And remember that. So let's go back to 2022 for a minute. Let's just ask this question. If the South Carolina debacle doesn't happen, Hendon Hooker's not only in New York, he's the favorite to win the Heisman, right?
Oh, I wouldn't say favorite. I've thought that through my head, and I would have probably had him second that year, but certainly in the discussion. Now, let me put that back on you. Does his success hurt Nico because you could be a product of the system?
No, because Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray both won Heisman's back-to-back years for Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, and then Caleb Williams won it for Lincoln Riley at USC. So people haven't really said, oh, it's Lincoln Riley. They still go, oh, production is what it does. I mean, in the 90s, Shane Matthews' success didn't stop them from voting Danny Warfel as the Heisman winner. So in 96. So I don't think that's going to have that much of an effect. That could hurt. I think that hurts you more with your NFL draft status than it does your ability to win the Heisman. I see what you're saying with Heupel, but I just think the flow of the game has been such that they haven't needed Nico to put up big yards yet. It's almost he's methodically, consistently had like a 200 to 250 yard game, a touchdown or 2 there. It's just kind of odd, but Vegas again is seeing what I'm seeing, and they're seeing a guy who's leading the number 1 scoring offense, top 5 scoring offense at least, top 10 scoring defense is helping out, but leading a top 5 scoring offense that is the quarterback that is going to have more chances to air it out. That's getting better as the season goes on. That's developing with his receivers. That now has a bye week and is going to come out next week playing. I mean, Dave, the next 2 games after this, Arkansas and Florida, 2 not very good defenses. And I think that Josh Heupel is going to use that to let Nico just air it out. Alabama, what happens if Alabama's a game where he could get locked in a shootout, just like 2022? Let's be honest, Dave. You take out the Alabama game of 2022. Hendon Hooker stats don't look Heisman worthy that much, but it was that you get locked in a shootout and you have a chance to throw 5 or 6 touchdowns and it changes everything.
Okay, so the Heisman Trophy has not been very nice to Tennessee on a couple of different occasions. Tennessee got snubbed. This question, is Nico still a true Heisman candidate? Just about 50-50. Good job by Dave. And I'm going to throw it out there. Deep down, I want Nico to win the Heisman, or deep down, I still hate the Heisman. What do you think our fan base will say as the votes are tallied?
I think they'll say deep down they wanted to win the Heisman. They want hardware in Knoxville, but you know what I would do deep down? If I was Tennessee, I wouldn't say this out loud, but I'd wait till the day before the ceremony when I know all the votes are tallied, and then I wouldn't show up.
Oh, come on, Caleb. You can't avoid. I mean, these guys are running out there in a Morgan Wallen concert. They're not going to avoid that sort of publicity.
That's how put your billboard in New York. Spend money that weekend, take a giant billboard out on Times Square. Just make your face everywhere, but don't show up to accept the award. But you'll be the one named.
I mean, I do like the concept of somebody cut them back hard. I remember, for those of you that don't know, I was suspended for the Alabama game one year because I refused to give up a source to the university that had me interview Inky Johnson over the phone. As it turned out, I was completely in the right, got employee of the month and all that stuff. But anyway, you'll have to trust me. I was in the right. You can do your research if you'd like. But I do remember we had a discussion of how to respond to this. And obviously you can't be a Knoxville paper and not cover Tennessee football, right?
Right, exactly.
One of the editors raised their hands. I've got an idea. Let's just call them and say that the News Sentinel is no longer going to cover your secondary non-revenue sports. Guess who that was?
Who?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
John Adams? Oh my gosh.
Would that not have been the greatest move ever?
To just not cover the other sports. Oh, that would have been hilarious.
Because it doesn't hurt your subscription base. They deserve to be covered, but you could argue that it's a bad business move to spend the hourly wage to send somebody over there. So I mean, I liked your idea of going back at them hard. I would do it like this. If Nico won it and he knew it, I would just first like to say this award goes to Johnny Majors and Peyton Manning as much as anybody.
Oh, that would be pretty epic.
That's better than not showing up.
Now I'm just thinking, John Adams, though, and I'd love him on to talk about this, but he was so bluffing. John Adams loved those trips that they get paid, that they sent him on to cover the Lady Vols, didn't he?
It's a good beat.
Yeah.
It's a good beat. There was Maui. There was a lot of other places. All right, let's talk some recruiting here. There's been breaking news. Tennessee has had a flip. Should you be concerned? Brought to you by Quality Tire Pros. The Eberle family has been serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. All work is covered by nationwide warranty. Cherokee Blvd or online at qualitytirepros.com, qualitytirepros.com. Tell Bo that Off the Hook Sports and Dave said hello. Concerns about Tennessee recruiting? Do you have any? Let's start with just the news, Caleb, if you can.
Yes, so Douglas Utu, who is an offensive lineman who was committed to Tennessee dating back to June, an offensive lineman in the 2025 class, has flipped his commitment to Oregon. He is a four-star, largely interior offensive lineman out of Vegas, Bishop Gorman High School, where Cedric Tillman came out of. He stands at 6'4", weighs 317 pounds.
Okay, I was told that he was very likely to flip. I was also told that this is not one of those situations, because I'm not going to come on here. Some other people will do that. I like to misspell stuff. And they'll tell you, oh, they ran him off and they didn't really want him. Caleb, that's both behind the scenes and from what you can see on your computer screen based off his rating, that was not the case here.
No, not at all. Tennessee wanted this kid. Glenn Ellery was going after him hard. So, and you're right. A lot of people have been saying it's a matter of when, not if, he will flip. The question is, what led to this? Was it just the NIL Nike money? Because let's be honest, how do you commit to Tennessee? You see how they started this season and you say, based on what you've seen them do this season, oh, I'm flipping. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, I think it is NIL money. I think the Nike stuff's overblown because you got to remember Tennessee's a Nike school. So Nike can only give so much to Oregon before they start to upset other schools. Most of the great schools are Nike schools. So I think that's a little bit overblown, but there's a lot of money in that area up in the Northwest. So I don't think they're struggling to find NIL people. To me, this is just an annoyance. I think it's probably mostly about cash, but Oregon has a young, engaging coach, and I think better days or good days are ahead for them. I don't know about championship days, but I will tell you this, and I don't want to sound like I'm coming down on a young man because I made a lot of bad decisions when I was 17 and 18 and 19 and 20, 21, 22, but especially 17. This is a bad move because you're going to most help yourself for the NFL by going to the SEC. And there is just no doubt about that. I've talked to many NFL scouts that feel like the SEC is the proving grounds to be in the NFL as far as a lineman goes. And if you didn't play in the SEC, you better go to the Senior Bowl, and you might just get dominated by an SEC lineman. That's why you see a lot of the SEC guys not go to the Senior Bowl, because they don't feel like they have to prove themselves. Now, if you're borderline, I think not Tyler Barron, but Barron Young, I think he went.
Byron Young,
excuse me. But I think he went. Correct me if I'm wrong. But nevertheless, I don't think this is a good move for the kid. And I think it just makes him a little bit more questionable in NFL scouts' eyes. And I'm not directly questioning his toughness or heart or anything like that. But I would also say this: if he doesn't want to compete in the SEC, then that's a red flag. Now, that being said, he could have an ailing grandmother in Eugene. I do not know the full backstory. I just know that Tennessee expected to lose him, and now they've lost him. And I don't think Tennessee could have done anything to really save that, because I've been hearing it for almost a month that he was going to flip.
Okay, let me ask you this. Is the blow of going for the SEC to Oregon lessened given the fact Oregon's now in the Big Ten, so you still will face, I know it's not the SEC, but is it close enough that you'll face legit competition?
Well, that's a good argument. Yes, I hadn't thought about that. But again, okay, let's take that a step further. Is it better to play in the Big Ten now? Because if you didn't know, did you know touchdown passes are down 22% in the NFL?
They are. I don't know. And so is passing yards. And I don't know what's going on this year. And maybe you do.
I do. It's all cyclical. I've seen it happen 2 or 3 times because I'm old. So what's happening now is defenses have gotten too light, and you're able to run the football at them. So here in about 6 or 8 years, we'll go back the other way. Just like 3-4 goes to 4-3 and 4-3 goes to 3-4. So you could argue that given the state of the NFL, that this is a good business move. It's a very savvy moxie point by Caleb here, because you're in the Big Ten, and what did they do on offense?
They ground and pound, don't they? Most of the time.
Right. So does that make you, I mean, it's all things being equal, the money, the school, the facilities. If you're an offensive lineman, are you better off going to the Big Ten now instead of the SEC? I don't think so. But if I'm Ryan Day, or if I'm Dan Lanning, or I'm a coach in the Big Ten, I'm going to use that argument.
Well, this actually plays to what, honestly, this oddly plays to what Tennessee's offense has been through the first 4 games, hasn't it? It's the number 1 offense in the nation. Nico's numbers are pedestrian. It's because they're running the ball. And it's because they're running it so easily against, I never thought about that, but you're right. Teams have gotten so hell-bent on stopping these new passing offenses and getting the extra defender out there and things like that, that they've totally forgotten to have enough war daddies and elite linebackers up front to stop the run.
Yeah. And that further accentuates the difference between Sonny Dykes at TCU and Josh Heupel, because I don't think Dykes is happy winning unless he scores 50 points. I think at the end of the day, he thinks about points left on the board. I think that Josh Heupel, after the win against Oklahoma, thinks about, wow, I'm glad I didn't go for more points on the board, because, guys, that game was more losable than you think. I mean, again, if Tennessee doesn't flip that turnover back on the Sooners, they easily could have lost that game.
They could have. I still maintain, unlike you, that they could have scored a couple of times in the red zone, or when they approached the red zone, and just chose not to because they were like, the field goal will do it for us.
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think they were ever in danger of losing it. But if they don't flip it, they have to win another way. And then it's at least a bit unknown, right? Because of the offensive tackles.
Yes. No, that's fair to say. I'm with you on that. So losing Douglas Utu to Oregon, I don't know what fully to make of it. I will say that this kind of throws in, you're right, he's out of Vegas, so maybe it's closer to home, Oregon, things like that. But This also kind of throws in the idea that recruiting is going a little bit more national now, and the style of coaching you run is important. And what is Dan Lanning trying to do, Dave? He's trying to build Oregon the way Kirby Smart built Georgia. He's a Kirby Smart protege. And he wants to build a team with those gigantic linemen up front, offensive and defensively, and build everything out from that. He's done as good of a job as you possibly can. But I mean, I think I come to your side on that. There's a ceiling. So maybe with Douglas Utu, what he's thinking is because there's a ceiling, there's more opportunity to play. Could that be it?
Could be, but I'd rather come to Tennessee, and if I proved I'm ready to play as a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, I get to play some. That's why I put that list of players that played against Oklahoma in the message board. I'd rather play some, develop my game against the best, than go to Oregon and eventually play at some point. I mean, because what Josh Heupel's doing is very unusual, and he's doing it because he has that many talented players. But you don't see people playing 12 defensive linemen in a game. I would argue right now that other than blowouts, nobody else did that in the nation.
No one does that. It's insane how deep Tennessee goes on the defensive line. But
so
on
all things being equal, unless there's emotional tie, did Douglas Utu just Utu the bed?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, really? If you're in Vegas, you can fly to anywhere, like a straight shot, just about. So don't give me that he's West Coast and that Oregon makes a big difference. It's probably a 2.5 hour flight to Oregon. It's a 4 hour flight to Knoxville. I mean, that doesn't carry water for me. So I don't think that was the big factor. So if he made a lot more NIL money, great. But I don't know that Tennessee would be necessarily outbid unless they just fell in love with him and offered him an incredible sum of money, or maybe he played Oregon and said, Tennessee's going to give me $2 million. That's why these numbers need to be public and they need to balance out at some point. You need to know what you're spending on particular players. And I know that everybody, at least I think, knows that Lance Hurd is making a mill. I've been told he's the second highest paid player other than Nico by a good source. Now, part of that's because James Pierce doesn't like being in the public, and he's not making extra money that's there. He's making a mill too this year. But I think those numbers need to be public knowledge. These are still public institutions, Caleb. So if you want to go do your deal on your own, that's fine. Like Cooper Mays, for instance. I mean, I don't talk about what Cooper Mays gets paid. I don't think he talks about it to other people. But now that it's run through the universities, or will be next year, those numbers had better be public knowledge, right?
Oh, yeah. And also because, and if you're a school, you almost prefer they become public knowledge, because otherwise it starts to raise so many other questions, because, and those narratives affect you in recruiting elsewhere. Because Dave, let's be honest. Let's go to the NFL for a minute. A bunch of teams try to land a player. The player picks one team. Nobody comes out and says, well, what's wrong with the culture of these other teams? Why didn't he go here? No, they look at what he was offered and like, oh, this team offered him the most money. That's why he went there. I mean, it's that simple, right? When there's a free agent in the NFL market.
True. Now, let me ask you this. I'm going to go really tinfoil hat on you. Okay. Do you think Utu saw Tennessee's young offensive tackles? Now, he started looking around about 4 weeks ago. So this is not based off the Oklahoma game. But do you think maybe he saw Tennessee's offensive tackles in Lance Hurd, who I know is a transfer and a lot's expected of him, but he's just a sophomore, and Larry Johnson III, who I do believe is going to be a very, very good player. And this guy, Utu, is the size, 6'7"-ish, where he's going to be a tackle. He doesn't need to play guard. He doesn't need to play center.
No, he's 6'4".
Oh, 6'4". Okay. Well, he's rated as an offensive tackle. Maybe he looked at Tennessee, especially with David Sanders Jr. committed, and said, I don't know that I can get in at one of those two tackle positions, kind of like a quarterback evaluates schools when they're making their decision.
No, because I still actually think he's going to be in line to fight for one of those guard spots when he goes to Tennessee. So I think there's a lot of starting options. I'm sorry?
Or would have been.
Would have been, yeah. So I think a lot of those starting options would have been there. I think it actually is more Oregon. I don't know what they promised. I don't know what they offered. Look, here's the weird part, and this is the truth. Tennessee and Oregon actually have very similar NIL collectives. For those of you who don't know, they both have. They don't just think about what we're offering up front. They think about what they can promise players on the back end, all the way down the line. The only thing I could say maybe with Oregon is that they are offering more up front because, Dave, as you know now, Tennessee is focused on offering more on the back end to players now than they are on offering up front with NIL.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if, and now here's where this gets really shaky. You just saw UNLV's quarterback decide to sit out the season. A USC player is now doing the same thing. Here's where Tennessee could have trouble with their strategy going forward. And you wonder if this is an effect. Players are going to start trusting less and less this promise of NIL money on the back end because there's no proof that they'll be allowed that money on the back end or given that money. They're going to want something in writing at that point. And I think, could that hurt Tennessee in recruiting, Dave? Because Tennessee's strategy is, look at what we can give you on the back end if you perform. And I think a lot of players are seeing what's happening at other schools and are thinking, yeah, I'm not going to take you up on that offer that you'll pay me on the back end because I'm not sure I trust you.
Yeah, but I think the market's going to settle itself out where maybe Oregon loved this guy in particular and they've got a massive hole in their offensive line. I don't know them well enough. But I think that stuff settles itself out financially. I think the market will. So go ahead and I have an ask. Please hit the like and subscribe button and we'll take a look at Tennessee's upcoming signing class and why or why not the Vols shouldn't be worried. It's brought to you by Quality Tire Pros. The Eberle family has been serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brake, alignments, oil changes, and more. All work covered by nationwide warranty. Cherokee Blvd, right there, qualitytirepros.com. Also, if I may, I want to remind you about our good friends at Work Trucks. We'll pull that up. But first, let's look at who Tennessee has ready to sign. David Sanders Jr., who's a higher rated player than Utu at offensive tackle. As far as other offensive linemen, they've got Nick Moore, who plays for our good friend Spencer Riley up at Jeff County. He's a 4-star kid. Don't just think local guy. You know, Tennessee went and got a guy and his coach is a former ball. No, that's not it. That's something the coaching staff back in the 90s and 2000s would have done. The staff isn't like that. They have Antoni Cade Agamoro, an offensive tackle who's just a 3-star. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that it's late in the recruiting cycle because of the early signing day, but Tennessee would be best suited to go out and maybe they have to throw some NIL cash. They need another elite offensive lineman in this class, right or wrong.
Yeah, they do, but don't forget this. They also had a pretty, I believe it was last year, solid signing class of guys that some of them are going to get on the field. I mean, Gage Ginther, Max Anderson, and William Sadoway, Dave. I know they're not starting this year, but like, let's be honest. They're not helping the depth issue this year because they're true freshmen, but we expect all three of them to be solid linemen in a year, right?
I feel good about Satterwhite. I don't have a good feel in the other two. I'm not doubting them. I know Satterwhite's going to be a player. I know Larry Johnson III is going to be a player. I don't know the other guys, but I'll ask around.
Okay.
Give you as much insight as I can. So let's take a look at the 2024 class that you're referring to. Who all did they bring in? I'm gonna pull that up. I'll remind you, it's brought to you by Work Trucks with an X, LLC.com. Work Trucks, all about trucks and the trucks you need. If you don't mind pulling that up, Caleb, Work Trucks with an X. Man, trucks that are actually available, trucks that help you maximize your profits by having the right work vehicle available. Time is money. The perfect work vehicle doesn't break down, has all the space to carry what you need. That's what Work Trucks is intent on offering, while other dealerships just can't do it. Contracting is about time. Work Trucks with an X saves you time with less back and forth trips and trucks that pass the highest standards to be put to work. The process quick and easy when choosing a vehicle for work trucks, cargo vans, utility body trucks with an iPod work bodies installed, pickup trucks of all sizes, and anything special like cranes or dump trucks. Work Truck supplies vehicles to people just like you, and get you on the road tomorrow. No dealership runaround. Remember, work trucks. That's a fact. Service industry work trucks. Work trucks with an X, LLC.com. They've got the trucks that your business has to have. You need work trucks. Clinton Highway in Knoxville and downtown Birmingham. For the entire inventory, go online to worktrucksllc.com. Worktrucksllc.com. Work trucks, I'm telling you, have you fit to a T. Proud supporters of the Tennessee Vols. So when I go back and look at Tennessee's latest signing class, the 2024 signing class, you mentioned some of the guys that, to be quite frank with you, I don't have a great feel for yet, with the exception of Satterwhite. But I think you also have to keep in mind that Tennessee can supplement. Now, the Lance Hurd situation hasn't gone as planned to this point, but I think Tennessee's one of those schools that will have the cash to supplement. And I believe the haves and have-nots, there's going to be a disparity between those two. And there's not going to be a lot of teams and programs that can go outbid an LSU guy for their own guy. And I know that Hurd wasn't going to start. I guess long way of saying, if this is a big miss in UT's coaches' minds, which I don't think it is, they expect it to be coming. They didn't go all out to save him. I think they did their best. But I don't believe that Tennessee should be overly concerned, because they're one of the schools that have cash to go out and pick up a transfer.
Here's why they should be concerned. They signed 5 offensive linemen in 2024, 3 of them 4 stars on 247 Sports composite. How many, if William Satterwhite's the only one that works out from that group, Dave, that's a fail. That's a huge fail, quite honestly. And
I want to be clear, though. I'm not saying that's the case. But I do know that based off people I've talked to, that guy's going to be a player, and they feel comfortable, as comfortable as you can, about him stepping into Coop's shoes next year.
Okay, so they're going to throw him in at center next year, William Satterwhite. Yes. Okay, so which is a great sign for them. But if these other guys don't step up, then that's just more misses by Heupel up front. Now, a guy like David Sanders coming in next year, that's a guy you don't miss on, right? That is I do the whole our wives could look at him and be like, oh, he could play football in the SEC.
Yes.
And that's David Sanders. But I mean, again, there is still evaluation required beyond those top guys. And they're not evaluating them well at this point. They haven't proven they can evaluate well. Now, you're right. Get the proven guys in the transfer portal, but how often does that work out? I mean, I think about it in the NFL. You can't build it. You can maybe build a Super Bowl championship team through free agency one time. You can't build a dynasty through free agency, though. You got to build that through the draft. And I think it's the same with recruiting.
Well, we'll see what Ole Miss does. I mean, I agree with you, and I think it's blown up in some people's faces, UNLV. But let's see if Ole Miss is able to pull it off.
I mean, one, if Ole Miss does pull it off, Lane Kiffin won't stay there, so they won't be able to pull it off, because then they'll go to Florida. And why would Lane Kiffin waste his time with the transfer portal in Florida when there's a little radius of about 20 miles where he can just build a national title team that way? Although, I don't know. Maybe that's only Miami. But no, Central Florida, you can still get national title talent out of there, right?
Yes, I think you can get – right now, I think you can still get talent out of anywhere. Those guys rarely, because it's such a an odd area of people moving in, that they rarely have huge allegiances to one school or another. Give me a minute, and then I'm going to tell you why you should be concerned about James Pierce, even though everybody wants to tell you, oh, it's no big deal, he doesn't have a sack. Stay tuned, Off Flick Sports.
I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com, or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com.
Now in its 45th year, the second and third generations continue Joe Neubert's commitment.
His vision of what this business needed to be, we still try to live up to that. If we wouldn't put our family in it, we're not going to put their family in it. If you're going to say that you're doing the best work in Knoxville, now saying it's one thing, producing it and providing it's another.
The largest family-owned collision center in Knoxville is Joe Neubert Collision Center.
Are you ready to get strong? At NFC, we offer top-notch weight training and functional fitness, so you can build strength and improve your performance. Join today at NFC1.com or stop by any one of our 7 East Tennessee locations.
The Dave Hooker Show, represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win, BanksJones.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, wizard.
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports,
What?
YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Welcome back. I tell you what I would like for you to do, if you don't mind, is I would like for you to join Hooker's Corner. And the reason is you will be eligible for a Garmin watch worth over $1,000. So here's the QR code where you can join Hooker's Corner. Okay, so you can join it for free. And as long as you're a subscriber of this channel, we will give you a Garmin if we have our drawing. How easy is that? Just by being a free member. That's right, a free member. When we hit 8,000 subscribers, it's Rick Terry's Grade 8 Garmin Challenge. We are going to give away a Garmin. Also, we give away weekly prizes, as well as a great monthly prize. It's a pick six glossy photos that are signed by Tennessee's current defensive backs. And that, of course, is brought to you by our friends at Sports Treasures. 35 years in North Knoxville, Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures. Follow on Facebook at sportstreasurestn.com, sportstreasurestn.com. But again, join Hooker's Corner. If we can put the link in there, I'd greatly appreciate it. And I certainly want to take a second to tell you about my great friends at Rick Terry Jewelry Design. Rick Terry Jewelry Design, it just has the fire opals that are phenomenal. You have to check them out. I don't know why I went Vic Vital on that, but Rick Terry Jewelry Design is absolutely fantastic. You need to check them out. And again, those fire opals are awesome. Caleb, I'm going to break from basically everybody else and say, yes, I am a little bit concerned that James Pierce doesn't have a sack to this point. Caleb, I can see by the look in your eyes, you're going to argue with me. But if I'd have told you before the season that James Pierce didn't have a sack a month into the season, you would have said, oh, did he get hurt? What happened? Especially against 3 of the 5 opponents they played. I mean, I think there are times where Quincy Calhoun, Caleb's 3-month-old son, could have gotten a sack. And by the way, all super chats go straight to Quincy's college fund. Caleb, I'm concerned about James Pierce. Talk me off the ledge here.
Okay, Dave. Guys, did y'all notice that Dave's just decided to pick today to be totally down on Tennessee? You know, they're not going to have the offense because of the line. They're not.
Listen,
Dave's a hater, guys.
Okay. Wherever Lawrence Taylor played, do you think he went 5 games without a sack? Wherever Derek Thomas played, I'm talking about the elite pass rushers of my lifetime. Do you think he ever went 5 games in college without a sack? No, he didn't.
Dave, let me ask you this. I'll float this to you at the beginning of the year. James Pierce is not going to get a sack. But Tennessee's defense will give up 7 points a game through the first 4 games of the year. What would you say?
I don't believe you.
Well, they gave up 7 points a game through the first 4 games. And this is what I mean. James Pierce is clearly a disruptor. And it's obviously happening more than we're seeing. One, he keeps getting close to a sack. He's getting a lot of hurries and he's forcing a lot of throwaways. This is common for defensive linemen and elite defensive ends, which is that I know what Will said at the beginning of the show that that people are saying that he's getting double and triple teamed and he's not. That part's true. He's probably not, but they are purposely designing their blocking schemes to avoid him at all cost. This happens. This happened again. I say this all the time, going back to 2013 with Jadeveon Clowney, who I think you and I would both agree. Jadeveon Clowney's the last end to generate as much offseason hype as James Pierce, right? Maybe Myles Garrett, but I thought Jadeveon Clowney was more.
I know. Jadeveon Clowney probably, other than a quarterback, created more recruiting buzz during my time covering recruiting than any other player other than a quarterback that I've ever been around.
Yeah, I agree. I actually remember his recruiting process too. Funny enough. I think Lane Kiffin tried to get him.
Well, how about Robert Kimdiche? I would say those two. But
okay. So Jadeveon went from 13 sacks to 3 sacks in 2012 to 2013. After all that Heisman hype, teams were running away from him. Guess what? South Carolina still went 11-2, finished number 5 in the nation. And if not for a fluke one-handed catch by Marquez North when he visited Butch Jones, Steve Spurrier would have had South Carolina playing for the SEC title that year, maybe winning it and playing for the national title. So, I mean, I think that this is just this is just the nature of playing on the defensive line, unfortunately, particularly playing at an end spot. It's a little bit different between tackles because elite defensive tackles are the ones who draw double and triple teams. I don't think ends draw that many, honestly. I think with ends, you just run the other way.
Or you can chip them with the tight end you mean in the run game or in the pass?
I don't think they have too long. You're right. I don't think defensive ends draw 2 linemen blocking them. They may draw an extra tight end, but they never draw 2 linemen.
Most guards aren't fast enough to get over there. So no, you chip them with a tight end or you chip them with double team them with a tight end. You could potentially do that. Of course, that's going to take a receiver out of the pass pattern and create other issues in terms of what you want it to do schematically. You chip them with an offensive lineman. A running back. That's something else you can do. But ultimately, here's my issue, Caleb, and think about this. We're talking about a young man who has had a tough upbringing. We're talking about a young man who did get a lot of hype and a young man that we know does not like being in the spotlight. If so, you'd see him all over billboards. You'd see him on commercials like Coop. And if you're in the Knoxville area, I don't know where you're watching, but Coop's everywhere. Coop's great. Coop gets more TV time than I do, which, it bothers me a little bit, but that's fine. But Pierce doesn't like being in the spotlight. Okay. But nobody said he doesn't like having sacks. So if he's a little bit Lane Kiffinish in that he's not crazy about social settings, at what point might he become disengaged with the team? At what point, if we're 8 games deep, let me ask you this. If we're 8 games deep and he doesn't have a sack, are you then concerned? Give me your answer. Brought to you by Asia Cafe. Treat yourself to authentic Asian cuisine, handcrafted from guarded family secrets, family recipes that are awesome. 5 locations to choose from. AsiaCafe.org, AsiaCafe.org. They've got the 6-to-1 Brazilian Cocoa Energy Booster Premix Instant White Coffee. The Golden Label, you can see it right over my shoulder. The Golden Label coffee bag with Philip Williams' grandfather and grandmother right there. Since 1909, they've been there. Philip has carried the torch as a 3-generation family business, now expanding the Lim dynasty in Knoxville. All right, so if we're game 8, are you worried that James Pierce doesn't have a sack if that were the case?
Not if he's playing the way he's been playing. And look, James Pierce has an agent. I'm sure he has an agent in his ear, right? They all do. And I'll give NFL scouts credit on.
I've been told he doesn't trust a lot of people, so I don't know if he does have an agent. He might actually not.
Well, there's got to be an NFL. There's got to be some NFL scouts in his ear, right?
Yeah, I could see him being the type of guy that waits to have an agent until he absolutely has to. I could see him being the type of guy that if the money is even close to comparison, he might want to stay at Tennessee, but I don't think it's going to be.
Well, I'll tell you who he might trust is a guy like Rodney Garner. Then, if you don't trust a lot of people, Rodney Garner's a great guy to have as your coach, right? Who will make you somebody. He is somebody you can trust. And the reason I'm saying all this is what I think he has to know, because if I know it, someone's told him. I'm going to give NFL scouts credit on one thing, Dave. They don't fall for the glorified stats of defensive linemen. Have you ever noticed that?
It's very true.
They plug in tape for defensive linemen to look at whether or not they want them. And so with James Pierce, I think the message you send him is, I don't think he's going to quit on the team, because you say, hey, you keep disrupting plays. You may not get sacks, but your NFL scouts are going to stay in love with you with that. They're not going to fall for the fact that, oh, you had 12 sacks last year and now you only have 2 or 3 this year. They don't fall for that stuff. I mean, Jadeveon Clowney went from 13 to 3 and was the number 1 pick in the 2014 draft still, and probably should not have been the number 1 pick looking back, but was. And
well, yeah, I don't know if you know this, but he had bad feet. So that was, I knew that. Some NFL scouts didn't know that. If you have bad feet, that's the end of it as a football player. And he had bad feet, had a couple of foot surgeries they tried to keep hidden at South Carolina. But that's where all your explosion comes from, especially like your big toe. So I knew that he was going to have issues, and he has.
He has. And then Steve Spurrier didn't help him with kind of threw him under the bus at one point. But I don't think he meant to. I think that's just Spurrier can't help but be honest sometimes. But yeah, he was still the number 1 pick. So I think scouts are going to fall for this with James Pierce. If he struggles a little bit, in terms of stats, if he's disrupting every play, he'll still be a top 5 pick in next year's draft. And if you're James Pierce, look, I think the NFL is getting to a point, Dave, there's such a clear distinction between competently run franchises and incompetently run franchises. You don't want to be a number 1 pick anymore in the NFL. Have you not noticed it is the same darn teams getting the number 1 pick every year now?
Yeah, but that cash money's pretty good. All right, so, I mean, it falls pretty far. We know from the big bong smoking Laramie Tunsil that it cost him something like $15 million to go from top 5 to 18-ish. Timothy says, and throws a little cash to Quincy's college fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy.
He's not Reggie White, so doesn't weigh 300 pounds. I'm not sure. I'm glad for Quincy, but I'm not sure what that means.
Well, I mean, yeah, but Reggie White played defensive tackle in college, too.
Yeah. Timothy, put something else in there. Clarify your statement there, because I'm a little bit confused. Okay, so let me ask you this. Fill in the blank. I am blank with James Pierce not having a sack. Caleb, what say you? Fine, surprised, shocked.
I'm fine with it. I expected a drop off.
on.
I'm not that worried about it. I'm not.
I didn't say worried. You're not at least surprised. I'm shocked.
Okay, fair enough. I'll say I'm surprised that he hasn't had a sack to this point. Fair enough. I could say surprised. But I don't think that, like, again, who cares? He'll be a first-round pick, and he's disrupting every single play for Tennessee. Go look at the tape. He's having a huge impact. It's actually similar to, again, I think Jamal McCoy is a big reason the pass rush is so good. He's taken away a side of the field.
Okay, that's pretty good. I will give you that one. But still, you've got to give me that you're at least surprised that he hasn't had a sack to this point.
Okay, fine. I'll give you surprised.
Okay, you've got to give me that you're shocked. There is no way in the world that you thought we would be heading into October with teams like Chattanooga and Kent State on the schedule, and that James Pierce wouldn't have a sack.
No, I'm
shocked.
I'm not. No, I'm never shocked on this way with defensive ends ever, because I've seen it 1,000 times over. It is so easy to neutralize the defensive end in a game. It is the easiest position to neutralize in football.
Okay, we discussed this a little bit earlier. And I'm going to ask you, and I might put it up as a poll question, I might not. That's how I roll. Tennessee's most important defensive player is?
I'm still going Jermon McCoy. I listened to Keenan Peele. I like the Keenan Peele argument, but I've been going Jermon McCoy because, again, guys, look at what he's doing. He's shutting down one half of the field as a cornerback.
Okay.
Tennessee hasn't had a cornerback ever in my lifetime that can do that.
Okay, I want to go with your list. All right. So let's go with your list. Jermon McCoy's number one. Keenan Peele's my number one. Okay. My number two is Jermon McCoy. What's your number two?
My number two is Keenan Peele.
Okay. Who's your number three?
Arian Carter.
Okay. I was going to go with Ricky Gibson the third. Who's your number four most important player on defense? And there's no way that Arian Carter's more. I'm backtracking. It's not Ricky Gibson the third. James Pierce is dictating pass protection.
Okay, fine.
He's got to be number three.
James Pierce is number three. James Pierce is number three on our list. Okay,
we can make an argument for McCoy and Peele, but I think we're kind of wandering down the YouTube rabbit hole here.
But that's the point. James Pierce is dictating pass protection as it is, and no one's like that. Is why the Tennessee's so dominant with its defensive front right now.
Okay, you talked me off the ledge. There you go. Caleb did it. I am not concerned about James Pierce. I am always concerned about Caleb's picks because they haven't been great. But Caleb has given me the absolute promise, 110%, that any super chat you donate, and thank you to Timothy, that this money will go to Quincy's college fund. Our goal is to have Quincy's college paid for by the time he's 18. We've got a while because he's 3 months old. You know what would help you, Caleb, is if you put a couple of pictures of Quincy up now and then. Just go ahead. I mean, just beg for money like some people on YouTube do. Let's get to your picks, and we do that right now. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? Banks & Jones, T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. All right, it is time for Caleb's picks as we preview the weekend. How many games are we going to knock down here, Caleb? Because I'm most interested in the Georgia-Alabama game and where you stand, because I think we'll know a lot more about Alabama. I already know quite a bit about Georgia, but I think we'll know a lot more about Alabama and Kalen DeBoer after this game. Right now, I think he's still a completely unknown commodity. It kind of just depends whether or not you like the hire. And we had Will West on at the Sports Animal earlier, and he said there are big splash plays for Alabama that have gotten them to their undefeated record and that they played average against most of their opponents. I agree with most of that. I want to get to that pick, but who else is on your board? Who's on your money pick?
All right, so we got about 12 games to cover. I'll go down through them real quickly, just the major ones real quick. By the way, I was 3-2 on my best bets last week. Should have been 4-1 if Dave Aranda knew how to coach a defense against a Hail Mary. I've never seen someone play press coverage on a Hail Mary. Still can't get over that. But, yeah. All right, so Ole Miss, Kentucky. I got Ole Miss covering the 17.5 spread and over 52.5. I don't know if you agree with me on that or not, but I think Ole Miss is going to blow Kentucky out of the water.
I agree with that. I think that Ole Miss keeps rolling before a chemistry issue arises that I don't know what it's going to be, but I think at some point it does, and that thing crumbles down midseason.
Okay. Oklahoma State +5 against Kansas State, the over 54.5. Both teams were upset last week, but I got Oklahoma State covering this one. Or I'm not losing by as much as 5. Kansas State's favored by 5. They won't beat Oklahoma State by 5. And there, Texas A&M -4 against Arkansas. I could see Arkansas looking ahead to Tennessee, of all people, funny enough, and Texas A&M beating them a lot more comfortably. So I've got Texas A&M -4 in the over 51.5.
I'll tell you what, if Arkansas is looking ahead to anybody, they need a.
That's crazy.
Because they're not that good. All right.
Yep. Notre Dame minus 6.5 over Louisville. I think they cover that easily. I got the over 45. They burned me.
That's crazy.
I don't know about that.
You think Louisville's going to cover that?
Yeah, I just don't like Notre Dame's head coach. And do you remember I came back from that stance a little bit, and then sure enough, the next week they lost?
Yeah.
I just remember, listen, I don't want to read too much into this, but I remember when he was hired and they had a microphone in the locker room or the players, wherever they meet or whatever it is. Maybe it was the church there on campus. I don't know. But they celebrated. So I think a lot of times, I think Josh Heupel is a rare exception of a player's coach actually being a disciplinarian and being able to handle things and have a good culture. I just don't believe in Freeman long term. I think the wheels come off at some point, and it may be this year.
I think that's probably true. I don't not believe it, but I think at home against Louisville, I think Louisville is very overrated talent-wise, and there's some chemistry issues with Louisville with the way they mismanaged NIL in the offseason. So that's a plastic undefeated record they have, if I can use that word.
At least they don't have a problem of their biggest booster being a big racist.
Oh,
anyway, they moved on from that.
That's right. The Papa John's guy. Yes, that's right. Oh, Lord.
Who's been replaced by Shaq. All right. Who's up next?
So even though they just let me down, I think the spread's too high. Mississippi State plus 39 at Texas over 62.5. But Mississippi State has a horrible defense. I think their offense can score. I'm still not giving up on Jeff Lebby. I think they'll figure it out. So Mississippi State plus 39.
Are they putting Quinn Ewers back? Quinn Ewers is back, right?
I think he is.
Yeah. Well, the idea was to go back with Quinn Ewers. I will say
that's crazy.
Well, now I think I agree with you.
Hey now.
So I will say that Mississippi State covers that number as you have an adjustment to make at quarterback going back to Ewers, which is what I've been told. Or you have more Arch Manning, who's still inexperienced despite his incredible play versus UT San Antonio a couple weeks back.
Yes, exactly. All right, so 3 more before the best bets. Actually, 2 more because I'm saving Alabama, Georgia for last because we'll get to that. But Penn State, Illinois, I got Penn State covering the 19-point spread, and I got the over 47.5. That's James Franklin and Brett Bielema. So I'm going on James Franklin covering. And then LSU, South Alabama, I think LSU covers the 22.5, and that game hits the over 65. So.
Well, I keep hearing that LSU's offense is supposed to be good.
Hey now.
Yep. All right. So my best bets before the Alabama, Georgia, UCLA plus 26 against Oregon. That's my best underdog to bet to cover. UCLA won't lose by more than 26 to Oregon. That's an insane spread.
Hey now.
Agreed.
I got Ohio State beating Michigan State by more than 23.5. I think they're going to cover the 23.5 point spread against Michigan State.
Hey now.
It seems like Ohio State always covers and then loses the big one oftentimes to the Wolverines.
I agree. BYU's my super dog this week. I think they're going to upset Baylor on the road. And then getting back to LSU, we just talked about LSU, South Alabama over 65. Go way over. LSU lost Harold Perkins for the year. They have a good offense, and South Alabama has Major Applewhite as their head coach. Points, baby, all day long.
Major Applewhite. I hadn't heard that name in a while.
Right. And then lastly, Oklahoma, Auburn. I forgot to pick that originally. I think Auburn covers a 2-point spread against Oklahoma because even though Auburn's struggling, I think Oklahoma's struggling worse now. But here's the big one, Dave. Oklahoma and Auburn.
I will go ahead and tell you that Auburn wins that game outright.
I wouldn't be surprised if they do.
If so, we're going to have to look at Tennessee differently next week. But anyway.
Yes. But most importantly, put a lot of money on the under 46, Dave. I see like a 10-7 game here.
Hey now.
I would agree with that. All right. Are we ready to get to the big game?
Alabama, Georgia. Yes.
Okay. Last look brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. We picked Alabama, Georgia next.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
All right, Caleb. I've got Georgia winning by a comfortable margin. I don't know the spread, but I think Georgia wins by double digits, and really it's more in control than that. So I think the number is going to be scary for me because it's going to be, I'm going to guess, usually pretty good at this. It's Georgia around a 6-point favorite.
Go down a little bit.
Oh, it's tighter than that? Okay.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's Georgia 2.5.
Oh, I'm all about Georgia covering that.
All right, so you ready for this? Last night,
Hey now.
I was ready to go in with you on Georgia because I said that once Jalen Milroe plays faster offenses, his lack of fit in Kalen DeBoer's system will be exposed. That's what I kept insisting. I was ready to go to it, and then I turned on our guy Josh Pate, funny enough, of all people, and he brought up something I didn't think about. Dave, what happened last year when Kalen DeBoer faced Dan Lanning twice?
I don't know. Educate me.
He beat him both times.
Yes.
The year before, he beat
Oh, I
Oregon.
thought you were going to give me more than that.
Hold
Okay.
on, let me.
You're going to tell me how he beat him. Okay, go ahead.
Kalen DeBoer faced Dan Lanning 3 times in 2 years at Washington. Once at home, once on the road, once at a neutral site. He won all 3 games. Dan Lanning runs Oregon, and this is all relative, but is it fair to say that Oregon is relative to the talent in the West Coast, the Georgia of the West Coast? Whereas
Wait, say that again?
Dan Lanning is building Oregon the way he's building Oregon the same way Kirby Smart's building Georgia. He's trying to establish that same identity. And
He
Kalen
wants
DeBoer,
to, but you can't in the Northwest, but I'm sure he wants to.
but it's all relative, right? Yes, there's less in the Northwest, but there's also less physical guys at Washington equipped to handle the less physical guys at Oregon. So
Well,
it's somewhat relative.
It's not relative when you get hammered in the playoffs. That's why I think the SEC is going to dominate, continue to dominate playoffs.
I'm just saying Kalen DeBoer has a history of beating this defensive scheme and figuring it out. And so I kind of thought after he said that, I'm like, oh, I need to rearrange this. And Alabama's at home. They're excited. They're not going to have the distraction of Nick Saban Field. I'm hedging. You're going to hate me on this, Dave. I'm hedging. I'm splitting the baby. I think Georgia wins, but I think they win by 1. So I have Alabama covering the 2.5-point spread. And
on the flip side, if Kalen DeBoer has been holding stuff back the way Josh Heupel has been able to do in a different way, could this be Kalen DeBoer's coming out party? Would that be a better story if Kalen DeBoer, let's say, hammered Georgia, and then you're suddenly talking about Georgia is mortal, and there's another great team or great coach in the SEC? What's the better storyline as a journalist?
Oh, I think it's that one. That one's obviously the better storyline because then everybody's going to talk about Kalen DeBoer's backstory. And by the way, if he does that, Alabama's already recruiting well. Can you imagine what the momentum is going to help them on the trail? And guys, I think Alabama is out to prove that they're still Alabama. They still have the horses. I do think, by the way, I think the game is, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think the game's going to hit the over 48.5. I think Georgia's offense, when Carson Beck needs to, Carson Beck turns into an NFL quarterback and can gunsling it all over the field.
Yep. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports. I apologize we didn't have an opportunity to get to Heisman talk. Let's do that.
We did.
Oh, we did? Well, not as in-depth as I wanted to go. He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.